Hey there, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on HPE Aruba Networking Wi-Fi 7. My name is Danielle Williams, and I am your EPIC Program Coordinator here at D&H. I am excited to welcome you to this exclusive session for our partners. The EPIC Partner Program is designed to empower you with the resources, insights, and opportunities you need to drive growth and deliver exceptional value to your customers. Through EPIC, you gain access to exclusive programs, lead generation support, and the latest updates from our technology partners, including HPE Networking. Today, we're joined by our expert Aruba engineers, Paul Huff from D&H and Brennan Klensch from HPE Aruba Networking. Together, we'll explore how Wi-Fi 7 is transforming enterprise connectivity, unlocking new levels of speed, security, and efficiency for modern businesses. We certainly want this session to be interactive. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll address your questions during our dedicated Q&A segment at the end. Our goal is to equip you with the knowledge and tools to lead meaningful conversations with your customers about infrastructure modernization and to help you maximize your success as a D&H partner. Let's get started.
Okay, Danielle, I thank you very much for that. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll be starting things off with a quick look at how Wi-Fi has evolved and what's new with the Wi-Fi 7. So before we dive into Wi-Fi 7, let's look at how wireless has evolved. So Wi-Fi 5 laid the groundwork. It gave us the first real jump in throughput for a growing amount of devices. And then when Wi-Fi 6, a focus on efficiency, handling crowded environments far better, and improving the capacity by up to 4 times. So Wi-Fi 6E opened up the new 6 gigahertz band, giving us a very clean spectrum, free from any kind of legacy traffic and dramatically reducing interference. So now we move into Wi-Fi 7, and this is where everything begins to come together. It has the ability to double the channel width to 320. So data moves more freely with lower amounts of latency, and multi-link operation lets devices transmit across several of the bands at once for smoother performance, and 4K QAM encodes more bits per signal for a stronger throughput. Every generation has pushed performance further and further, but with Wi-Fi 7, it's the first designed to manage high-density, real-time type workloads effortlessly, and it's truly a platform that's built for what's coming next. So Wi-Fi touches almost every part of business now, and the scale is staggering. By 2029, we'll see over 15 billion devices connected through Wi-Fi. Everything from sensors, scanners, to cameras, automation devices. And that explosion of connections demands a network that can handle the massive capacity without any hesitation. So Wi-Fi 7 also enables sub-1 meter location precision, bringing new possibilities for asset tracking, indoor navigation, for smarter building systems. Because it's not just about connectivity anymore. It's about awareness and knowing exactly where things are and how they're performing and responding in real time. And with the work patterns changing, about 50% now of employees will work remotely, at least part-time. And that means collaboration tools, voice and video all rely on a wireless foundation that's consistent and dependable everywhere. So Wi-Fi 7 gives organizations that reliability, flexibility, and the assurance that no matter how many devices, locations, or users there are, the experience stays strong. So when we look at what it takes to keep today's networks reliable, secure, and adaptive, Aruba stands apart. Aruba has been recognized as a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for enterprise for wired and wireless LAN infrastructure for 19 consecutive years. An incredible run that shows consistency and trust across every generation of technology. And over that time, Aruba has grown to the second position in global market share, backed by the strength and scale of HPE. So Aruba also leads in vision. It's ranked #1 in IoT strategy and execution, building intelligent networks that go beyond connectivity, and networks that understand context, location, and device identity. And all of this is powered by more than 20 years of AI innovation that's fueled by the largest networking data lake in the industry. That gives Aruba's Wi-Fi 7 the platform, the intelligence to self-optimize, to anticipate issues, and deliver consistently excellent performance. Aruba leads through intelligence and not just quicker hardware. As you can see here, Aruba's leadership isn't a one-time recognition. It's a record that's now 19 years in a row. And that kind of consistency doesn't just speak to technology, it speaks to trust. Every year, a Gartner evaluates execution and vision, and Aruba continues to lead on both fronts. It shows that our strategy isn't reactionary, it's stable, proven, and forward-thinking. For you as partners, that means confidence. When you would recommend Aruba, you're offering a platform that's backed by nearly 2 decades of innovation, reliability, and one that continues to set the standard for enterprise and networking. While others move in and out of the quadrant, Aruba stays at the top right corner year after year because performance, intelligence, and customer outcomes never go out of style. Industry recognition reinforces what the customers already experience in the field. Aruba's Wi-Fi 7 portfolio has turned heads as CRN has named it the product of the year in networking for wireless category. So this award isn't about just marketing. It's voted by channel partners and engineers who deploy these systems every day. They called out how Aruba's access points deliver real-world performance, simplified setup through Aruba Central, and AI-driven optimization that keeps network steady without the constant tuning. And it shows that Aruba's innovation goes beyond specs. It's about designing solutions that actually make IT's job easier and improve the user experience. So that combination of reliability, automation, and practical design is exactly why Aruba continues to earn this kind of recognition. So when you want to see how a network performs under real pressure, right? There's no better way than to test with Formula One. On the track, the data has to move instantly. Every sensor, every tire temperature reading, every split a second decision depends on it. And Aruba's Wi-Fi 7 network is trusted by teams that can't afford a delay. Live telemetry will stream from the cars to the pit wall in real time, carrying thousands of data points that helps engineers adjust strategy, the timing, and performance on the fly. It's wireless under extreme conditions, speed, vibration, and a constant interference, and yet it stays solid. So that says reliability powers, the same reliability, I should say, it powers hospitals, universities, and enterprises around the world. Because if it's saving seconds on a racetrack or keeping a business online, Aruba delivers low latency, stability, and intelligence that the networks of our time depend on. It's a perfect example with purpose, and of performance that it has held over all these years. So that's a look at Wi-Fi 7 and how it performs, where it really counts, and Brennan will pick up from here and break down what's happening behind the scenes to make it all possible.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate that. And hello, everybody. My name is Brennan Klensch. I'm Channel SE here at HPE Aruba Networking. Appreciate Paul, appreciate D&H, appreciate this program. I cut my teeth at distribution and started on Aruba at distribution. And if I've learned anything from my time there, and even coming full circle after being at a partner and back to here, it's that distribution doesn't get relied on nearly enough. They have so much value to bring to the table that a lot of times gets left at the table. So people like Paul, right, who are there to help you answer some of these technical questions, help with things like design, things like spec comparison, and I'd love to partner with them. We wouldn't be anything without having our channel, without having our distributors. So we're a huge distribution company, and I would have it no other way. And D&H is one of my favorite companies in the world. So looking forward to talking a little bit more about this, and specifically, our Wi-Fi 7 APs that do more. There was a question in the chat, and I'm sure it's on some other people's minds if y'all didn't see it, and I promise I will get to it regarding, of course, the elephant in the room that is Juniper, right, and the acquisition of Juniper. Certainly, we'll talk about that. It's obviously not the focus of today. This is a little bit broader, but that's important, right? As you guys are focusing on your customers and what they need, I certainly don't want to pretend like that's not important. So I promise you, we will talk about that. But let's kind of go macro for just a little bit on Wi-Fi 7 itself, and then we can kind of come down a little bit into maybe what that specifically looks like when you're looking at our solutions, right, and what we got to do. Speaking of Wi-Fi 7 APs that do more. The reason that we have that slide that says that, right, is as Paul was outlining some of the characteristics of what the Wi-Fi 7 standard looks like. That's always an interesting question, right? You have the standard, and you have what the standard defines as being kind of a minimum viable product for a Wi-Fi 7 access point. And then you have what a vendor delivers, right? Either they are meeting that ratified product, which, that's a subset of a conversation. Sometimes vendors will come out and give you APs that are, Wi-Fi 7, or, back when 6E was out, Wi-Fi 6E, and they try to be first to the market, when in reality, if the standard hasn't been ratified yet, you're not actually getting probably almost inevitably the full specs of what that standard promises. So we always make sure that even if we have to, as we shift in the models and what they each offer, down from the lowest budget ones up to the highest budget ones, one thing that we pride ourselves on is that we don't release an AP on the standard until the standard is ready to go and is ratified, right? So that's a big piece of differentiation for us, bigger than you might think, and it's bit a lot of people up in the rear. So let's kind of look at that when we're looking at this slide. What we are delivering, yes, is the Wi-Fi 7 ratified AP. That's table stakes. But where we try and go further, and I don't think anybody would necessarily argue this, is that we put a lot of investment into our hardware beyond what the standard requires, right? So that when you go to buy something, it's not just to get the latest and greatest on the standards, which may or may not be suited to enterprise environments, but in fact bring more to the table than just that, right? So when you look here, right, a couple of things that we bring to all of our 700 series APs that are not necessarily part of the standard. Number one, when we start talking about our 735s and up, right, which is a pretty go-to AP, kind of a nice performer. Not the cheapest one we have, but certainly one of the best ones we have for the price to value, ratio. The whole supports 2 times the number of IoT devices. Well, what does that mean? Is that part of Wi-Fi 7? No, it's not. We've had Zigbee and Bluetooth radios in our APs since, I believe, the 500 series APs integrated, maybe even the 300s, right? And we've always had a USB port on the back that you could use. But what we've started to do is in the 700 series APs, we've added another one of those antennas. And why does that matter? Why would you need that or want that? Well, if you are in hospitality, if you're in retail, if you're in healthcare, any of those verticals, if you touch any of them, essentially what you have to deal with a lot of the times is that there's a lot of IoT devices that use those protocols, that use Bluetooth, that use Zigbee. And what you end up having to do most of the time is kind of buying this parallel infrastructure that is handling just those devices. You have to get a gateway that handles just those devices. Let's say Zigbee, right? If they're running, like if it's a smart lock that runs on Zigbee, if you're in a hotel or if you have lockers somewhere, yeah, if you have a Zigbee based lock, you have to get a Zigbee gateway for wherever you have those things. And as you might imagine, in a place like a hotel, that's everywhere. And without RAPs in the hotel, that means that you're going to have to get a gateway for however many of those locks that you need, right? Whereas if you already have an Aruba infrastructure providing the wireless connectivity, having those dual radios in there means that those locks no longer have to have a dedicated gateway. They can just talk to the AP that's right close to them anyway. Right, something like that. That is above the standard. That's something that we as Aruba put into the hardware because we know it will suit specific use cases. What about another one? Sub-meter indoor location. When Paul was talking about it, I want to make sure to distinguish, right, in case there was anybody that wasn't clear on this. That was a demand, right? The sub 1 meter stuff has been a demand from the customer base, but it's not necessarily part of the standard. That's something that we do specifically. In fact, the Wi-Fi 7 APs, again, starting at the 735 and up, they actually have GPS units inside of them so that these APs can self-locate on a map, right? You say, I'm going to upload my heat map to Aruba Central, which is our management platform. I want them to self-place themselves on my floor plan so that I don't have to spend hours putting them and dragging them and doing all the wall types and all that stuff. I just say, hey, take account for where you are. And by the way, these Wi-Fi 7 APs, they add something that the Wi-Fi 6E APs didn't have, which is a barometric sensor. So not only are you getting this plane, right, the XY plane for self-locating, you're also getting this, right? It goes 3D. You go in two different directions now, which makes sort of this bi-level location hugely impactful. And again, this is not always to do with, well, there's always a specific use case in mind. Of course there is. We've had location services for a while, but what it does do is it opens up possibilities beyond just self-locating APs. And it says, hey, we're willing to play nicely with others. We use a standard called Open Locate that we introduced to the market that is open to anybody that wants to use it, right? So we work with zoos and aquariums and all kinds of places that want to use location services where it's not just about placing the AP, but how does it actually interact with clients and things like that. So again, some of this stuff that I'm going to talk about is not the standard itself, and that's kind of what I want to focus on. Okay, so here's what the standard itself brings to the table. And I want to talk about something that's going to sound counterintuitive to this entire webinar, what we're here for, which is to learn about the value of Wi-Fi 7 APs and why I spent so much time talking about the things we bring to the table beyond just Wi-Fi 7 and the standard. So let's look at them real quick. Right? Paul touched on them. I'll just touch on them real quick. Ultra-wide 320 megahertz channels. Awesome. Now, practically, what does that mean? Right? What does that mean down at the ground level? Well, it's kind of like if you have a speaker, right? The old school Bluetooth speakers, right? They were kind of mono sounding and tinny. And then as they got bigger and bigger, and you see those JBL capsule speakers, and Bose has, these Bluetooth speakers, they've gotten more and more robust, and they've gotten more and more capable, right? However, so essentially what you're doing is you're windowing, right? It's how big is my data window to send over the Wi-Fi signal? How wide of a space do I have? And 320 megahertz is a lot. We're talking orders of magnitude over stuff that you might have been used to in the 2.4 gigahertz band back in the day. However, what you do when you enable something like 320 megahertz is you kind of rob Peter to pay Paul, because the entire point for enterprises that we introduced in the Wi-Fi 6E standard was to open up the 6 gigahertz band, which gave you so much spectrum, because one of the major issues, and probably the number one, I'd say close to the number one contender for Wi-Fi performance issues, is co-channel interference or adjacent channel interference. Meaning that if there's an AP that is within hearing range, that is not your AP, right? Maybe you're broadcasting on channel 6 on 2.4 gigahertz, right? If somebody that is next to you or next to your customer is also broadcasting on channel 6, that creates a problem. It's like having two speakers playing two different radio stations at the same time in either ear, to your client, right? It creates confusion, right? The data can actually impact each other. Even if you don't have it on channel 6, let's say somebody does it on channel 3 or 4, even on a 20 megahertz wide channel, you start to bleed over into channel 6 on the 2.4 gigahertz band. So again, it's kind of like that speaker might not be right there and it's distracting. That's essentially what co-channel interference is. So when you enable these huge channels, what you take a massive risk of doing is stepping on your own toes, particularly if you have a high density environment, which these days is kind of table stakes to Wi-Fi design. So why am I saying this, right? Are you saying don't enable the thing that Wi-Fi 7 enables? That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that over the standards, right, even going back to 5 gigahertz, where we said, hey, you can enable 80 megahertz channels for the first time. And all of us engineers were going, don't do it, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. I tell my kids this all the time, right? It's like, listen, me not telling you specifically not to do something is not an implicit allow. And I'm not just saying you can do it if I haven't said not to. Same thing here. There's some thoughtful design that needs to go into this. And just because the standard allows for this stuff doesn't mean it works. Now, in something like Formula One, right, where we go back, where we're talking about it like a single user or just a small group of users in a very small section, maybe in a coffee shop that's not next to a bunch of other access points, and maybe there's only 1 or 2 access points in there. Okay, maybe then we can talk about it, right? And sure, that opens the window, and it means we can get a lot more data pushed through. Okay, however, in enterprise environments, and even in a lot of SMB environments where you're talking about 4, 5, 6 APs or more, this is not something that I necessarily recommend. What you do get in Wi-Fi 7 is backwards compatibility with Wi-Fi 6E. And Wi-Fi 6E is an enterprise-focused standard. And I guess that's kind of the overall point I'm trying to make. Wi-Fi standard was hyper-focused on enterprise, hyper-focused on using spectrum efficiently and opening up the 6 gigahertz band so that we could have these bigger channels. And there's so much more spectrum to use in 6 gigahertz that you were never going to step on each other's toes. That was the benefit. Wi-Fi 7 is a little more, I'd say, performance centric, right? It's a little more data centric, which is inevitably a little more consumer centric, right? It's a little more focused on, okay, now that we've efficientized the spectrum, what can we do to make this even perform even faster, right? How can I make it go faster? How can I make this fancier and shinier? And that's all well and good, but again, when we get into enterprise and commercial, we have to balance that, right? We have to balance these feature sets with the realistic expectation of design. Again, that's where I rely on people like D&H to help you guys, right, and your engineers learn how to design wireless properly, so that we're not just doing this stuff, and we don't have this stuff on by default, right? We're not silly like that. But I just don't want everybody going and clicking and saying, yeah, awesome, we'll buy it because we get 320 megahertz channels. It's important to approach Wi-Fi 7 thoughtfully. Okay. Number 2, enhanced reliability. This is a pretty cool thing. Multi-link operation. It's kind of exactly what it sounds like, right? Where our phones, I just got, in fact, it's recording. Sorry that it's like super close up to my face, but my phone is actually my camera for this, and it's the latest greatest iPhone, right? It's the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and I hadn't upgraded for a few years, so I was like, treat yourself day. So I got myself an iPhone 17 Pro Max. It's my camera, and the nice thing is it's Wi-Fi 7, right? But before, my iPhone 14 Pro Max was not 6E or 7, right? It just was capable on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. And all of our phones, thing previous to this, they would do that. When they would get on the Wi-Fi, they look around, and there's a conversation between your phone and the access point that's way too techie for any of us to understand. And it's essentially saying, hey, you're going to go on this channel, right, on this band. So I'm going to put you on my 2.4 gigahertz band, and I'm going to put you on this channel within that band. Or I'm going to put you on 5 and put you in this channel. So that's the conversation that happens. You don't really get to do both at the same time, even though it's like, well, that would be nice, right? It's like I have a device that's capable of doing both 5 and 2.4, and now I have a device that's capable of doing 2.4, 5, and 6. why not use all three of them? And that's essentially what MLO does, right? It answers that question of saying, yes, we're going to bring to the table this ability for phones and devices to be able to connect to multiple streams on multiple bands, right? Not just saying we're going to have to choose 2.4 and 5. Now, in practice, there's very few phones that support this. Luckily, the Pro Max is one of them, and some of the latest Samsung stuff does support it. A lot of it has been people is if you have MLO enabled, and a lot of it is not enabled by default on your clients, by the way. So even if your AP can do it, it doesn't necessarily mean your client's got it turned on. But let's say they do. What it's mostly going to, it'll choose one, right? It won't necessarily do all three. It'll say, okay, we're best suited for 6 gigahertz, and maybe we'll use the 2.4 as backup. And what you have there is you have a more reliable connection, right? And people, they'll see that improvement, right? They'll still see the improvement on their end, but it's probably not happening in the way that they think, and that's okay, right? The important thing, again, is to design thoughtfully and to make sure that, yeah, we can enable this stuff, but it doesn't necessarily do exactly probably the way we're thinking it, and that's okay. You know, that's the, again, this is every standard that's ever been out there, okay? I'm clearing up some FUD and also helping us embrace the standard as well. Third thing, improved user experience. 4K QAM. Okay, QAM is one of the weirdest, one of those, like, you got to have like a level 400 class and a doctorate in Wi-Fi to fully grasp what QAM means. But essentially, it's quadrupere amplitude modulation. I don't even remember what the Q fully is. I messed that up royally. But essentially, it's the way that an access point aims. That's the best way I can describe it, right? It's how the antennas and the radios and an access point, when they're sending data to an end user, and I always, when I do this stuff in person, I always want to bring a bunch of those little Nerf balls, and there's normally a group in front of me, right? And I'm like, okay, if I'm tossing a ball, one ball at a time, right, to somebody right in front of me, that's easy, right? And the target, let's say it's a big old, one of those big old Nerf targets, right? It's huge, like for my kids. So it's like, yeah, this is easy, right? I can do this. But then you move that target to the back of the room and you add more concentric circles so that the smaller Wi-Fi 6E to 4K QAM, we're literally essentially doing 4 times the amount of circles, right? So what happens is it doesn't get a bigger target. It's just the bullseye gets smaller, right? And because there's more places to hit. Now, you can get close and you can still get better data by getting close, right? Because you have new points to add. But if it's really far away from me and I'm trying to chuck a ball, and by the way, this is if I'm a single stream device. Most of our phones are 2x2. So I'm throwing 2 and I'm having to juggle and do it across the room and catch and do this for every single person in kind of this round robin style. That's essentially what QAM is. So again, 4K QAM is awesome and it does bring robust benefits to the table. However, practically speaking, right, we're better off on focusing on the 1K QAM that 6E brought us. And then, hey, for the people that are a little closer to the AP, they're going to see a little bit more of that boost, right? So again, we're going to see more and more of it. Last point here, adds up to 1200 megahertz of capacity in 6 gigahertz. Yeah, just like 6E. This is a thing that we introduced with 6E. But I think you're starting to see what I mean when I say you have to look beyond the standard when you are looking at a choice for your vendor, right? It's not just a matter of saying, well, they have Wi-Fi 7 APs. Everybody does at this point, right? Everybody can do the minimum viable product now. The question is, what do you bring to the table that's more? So when I go back to this slide, right, and I say we are doing things beyond Wi-Fi 7 to make it worth your while so that as you look at these refreshes, yes, you're getting brand new CPUs on the APs, you're getting double the amount of IoT radios, you're getting much better GPS, and you are getting a boost in performance for sure, but you're also getting all the wonderful benefits that came along with Wi-Fi 6E. That's what I mean when I say that, right? So as you measure and as your customers are looking at different options, that's something to bear in mind. What is the vendor bringing to the table that goes beyond just the Wi-Fi 7 standard? Okay. All right. So moving right along. Speaking of access points, here's more than anybody could ever want in a single space, right? This is all of our current access points, right? Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, and Wi-Fi 7. And we are currently offering all of those. So the Wi-Fi 6, just because we love to make it confusing, is the 500 series instead of the 600 series. The Wi-Fi 6E is in fact the 600 series. And finally, once we got onto Wi-Fi 7, now we're fully aligned on the standards with the numbering system. But Wi-Fi 7 is the 700 series. Now, this is kind of a proxy talk on Wi-Fi 6E, right? We're getting a little bit of that technical talk from 6E along with the Wi-Fi 7 stuff. But one thing I want to mention before spending too much more time on it is that outdoor Wi-Fi 6 and outdoor Wi-Fi 6E and outdoor Wi-Fi 7, when you get into outdoor powered models in either of these standards, right? Same thing. This is where that self-location becomes important, because in order to operate an access point outdoor on a 6 gigahertz band, in order for that 6 gigahertz radio to even turn on in the background, Aruba Central, again, our cloud management piece, Aruba Central legally has to have a conversation on the back end with the local FCC governing bodies to turn that 6 gigahertz band on. Why? Well, the 6 gigahertz spectrum is lightly licensed, right? There are certain channels that you cannot use if there are actual incumbents. And there are some people that used to use this standard before it became a public standard. So why do we say that? Is because it's important to understand that why don't we have more outdoor Wi-Fi 6 options, right? And Wi-Fi 6E options? It's because there's a lot more that goes into it, right? There's a lot more that you have to consider when you're doing outdoor 6 gigahertz. It brings a whole new element to the table that you haven't had to think about before. And again, I'm going to point you right back to the D&H folks. I'm going to point you right back to the engineering team and say, yeah, talk to these guys, right? Particularly if you've got an outdoor, we need to make sure that we've got Aruba Central tied to it, because that's how we talk to the FCC, right? And again, that we're designing properly. Now, we've got a couple Wi-Fi 7 outdoor APs that are getting ready to hit the market. You're going to see them very soon. They might take a little bit to get there. Probably would show up at your door closer to springtime. But in the meantime, right, if you're looking for outdoor, our Wi-Fi 6E outdoor, the 670 series, is shipping readily. And again, that 760 series will be ready here not too much longer away from now. So all that to say, there's lots of options for you. And it's all being managed by Aruba Central, which I would love to talk about at another time, but that's not what today is for. All right. Now, again, what do you bring to the table as a vendor that other people don't bring to the table? One thing that we got an award for, and rightfully so, is that when we introduced the 6 gigahertz band, we introduced this thing called ultra tri-band filtering. Basically what happens is when you are going from 5 gigahertz to 6, again, some of those early channels, they get real close to each other, right? And unfortunately, one of the ones that almost all APs and clients will want to use by default is, of course, that channel, right? It's like the kids choose the one song in the car that just annoys me. It's like they have to choose it every time, and they make me play it every time. And it's like, of course, that's what the client devices do when we do our Wi-Fi, right? They're gonna choose the one channel they probably shouldn't choose. Most vendors don't have an answer to this. There's going to be bleed over between your clients in the 5 gigahertz band on one of those top end channels and your clients in your 6 gigahertz band on the lower end channels. And they are going to interfere, just like I talked about earlier. It's going to create that co-channel interference that's going to cause problems. Unless you have this, it's creating an extra little buffer. It's essentially what it is. It's turning on some, white noise, right? And my kids have gotten into green noise. Now there's all the colors, right? It used to just be white noise. Now there's green noise, and they all have different spectrums and stuff. And now I'm kind of finding myself going more towards green noise. But, you used to turn it on just so that there's a baseline of noise, right? It's like there's something consistent across the back end that helps me relax, where I'm not constantly hearing every little noise in the house when I'm trying to go to sleep. That's me, right? I'm not using this as an analogy. That's essentially what's happening in this ultra tri-band filter. It's actually introducing a little bit of space that it allows it so that there's not so much crosstalk between those two frequencies. Because one of the pieces that we haven't gotten into, and I'm not going to, in Wi-Fi 7 is something called spectrum puncturing. It's essentially taking a big set of channels, and it's saying a little subset of that I can reserve for a client, right? If an IoT device or a smart thermometer doesn't necessarily need to stream Netflix, right? And if it is, you've got another problem on your hands. But let's say we've got that device. All it needs to do is get the temperature, right? So that doesn't require the whole channel that it's taking up. So spectrum puncturing allows you to just go whoop, right? It just needs this much. We're just going to give it a wee bit, right? And that's essentially kind of how this is working. It's using a combination of technologies, some of it, almost all of it proprietary on our end, and utilizing some of those Wi-Fi 7 standards to enable this spectrum puncturing and ultra tri-band filtering. And we're the only people that do it, right? So that's actually a fairly big deal, and it's come in handy a lot of the time. Now, one of the things that got interesting in the Wi-Fi 7 space, and this one, I'm not sure are doing this just yet, but AP. Now, if you know anything about MACsec, right, essentially it's typically a module that you have to buy on a switch, right? It's not going to be all of your switch ports because it just requires a lot more cryptography on top of what the switches are already doing, which is a lot. MACsec just literally does what I just said. It encrypts the signal on the wire, right? At the Ethernet point, it's actually encrypting the signal as it's going into the switch. And normally what you have to have is on both ends, you have to have MACsec enabled, because if only one end can encrypt, it's pointless on the other side if the other side can't do it as well. So up until this point, no access points have had MACsec on their Ethernet ports on the back. And what that technically opens up, right, the people that are interested in MACsec, if you never heard of it, don't worry about it. But if you have, you'll know that the people that are interested in it, they want to know that it's there as far as it possibly can go, right? Because it's literally physically preventing man-in-the-middle attacks. And so up until this point, a weak spot in that has been access points, because there is no necessarily encryption unless you are doing something like tunneled mode to a controller. There's no actual physical encryption happening from the switch to the AP. Whereas when you have MACsec, it does enable that. And we do have that on our 730 and our 750 AP. So again, not something that's required in the standard, but something that's recommended. And certainly we like to do that as best we can. We have it in the 730 and the 750. I don't want to spend too much time on stuff we've already talked about. I've already mentioned we're at sub 1 meter accuracy now, which is insane. 3 feet of accuracy is plenty for anybody. And so I can't imagine many use cases that have to get less than that in terms of accuracy. And there's no other vendors that are doing it that accurate that are out there. Virtual BLE and Bluetooth get you close, but there's a reason that we moved to this, because we've had Bluetooth for a long time. And this is something that we talk about a lot more now these days because it's a lot more accurate. And it doesn't require nearly the amount of extra devices and overhead that you need typically when you're talking about location services. Now, something that actually is practical for everybody to use is this thing called deep sleep, right? And it's reducing our energy consumption. And where this becomes very, very practical and translates to business outcomes into dollars. Right. I actually presented this to a stadium back in the day, because you have to imagine, right, a sports stadium where they have all these APs that have to be so hardcore, and they have to be some of the best that we have, right? They have to account for literally thousands of people coming in all at once, expecting to be able to tweet and write Facebook posts and stream and, trash the other team and talk about their team and blah, 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 right? It's like, yeah, of course. And particularly in collegiate sports, because this was a college stadium, right? So you've got all these young bucks that's all they do, right? And of course they've all got the latest and greatest. And then all of a sudden after the game, it's a wilderness for 6 days, right? 5 or 6 days of the week, it's barely being used. Maybe the back offices are being used. So you have these Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7 APs with their volume cranked up all the way, consuming mass amounts of power from the switches and energy that's not being utilized, right? It's just that they're constantly on. What if instead they are self-aware and said, okay, I know on Saturdays, right, if I'm college sports, or Sundays if I'm NFL, I know I'm going to have a big influx of people, right? And so, yes, I need to be ready late Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday, right? And then I can start to cool off a little bit. Monday through Thursday, I'm going to take my power down to the standby mode and put myself kind of in this deep sleep, so that I'm going from using 24 watts of power, or even 12 down to 2. Right. So you go from worst case scenario, you're talking an order of magnitude of wattage less, and that's just a single AP. You multiply that by the hundreds that are in a stadium, and all of a sudden you've got some serious cost savings, right, throughout the week that you wouldn't have had otherwise, right? That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Where now, of course, if you're not in a stadium, are you going to see that level of dollar value? No, but you're still going to reduce it, and you're still going to be more green in your energy consumption, and that's a big driver for a lot of our customers these days. So again, I pointed it out before, but just so that it kind of we zoom in on this, 720, 730, 740, 750 are our current indoor series Wi-Fi 7 APs. And then of course we have our hardened outdoor Wi-Fi 7 APs, the 760 series. The one that you see on the screen, there's actually going to be 2 in this family. The one that you see on the screen is actually more of a hardened AP, meaning it's meant to go in places like manufacturing, right, or warehouses, something that's like semi-outdoor. This isn't fully weatherproofed. This is just semi-hardened so that, yeah, it can take higher temperatures. It can take getting bonked around a little bit, right? It can take a little bit of water, but it's not something where you're going to dunk it underneath the pool. Whereas the other one, it's not pictured here for some reason, but the other one essentially looks very different than this thing, right? And it looks like a submarine. And that thing, yes, you can do whatever you want to. We actually, one of our conferences, we put one in an aquarium, and it was still blasting out Wi-Fi. Probably not the best Wi-Fi design, by the way, but if you ever need to, it's an option, right? So here you go. These are our access points. Again, some of these are not going to be shipping just yet. The 740 series will be actually later. Like I said, you'll be able to order them, but they're probably not going to start showing up until closer to late winter, early spring. And I've got all these on here. I think we'll be sending out a version of this presentation if I understand correctly, so you guys can kind of take a peek at some of this stuff and some of the deeper specs on each model, and just so you can see what they each look like. That's why we put this thing on there. Oh, here we go. Here's a picture. There you go. The one that looks like a submarine is the one that you can put in an aquarium, right? So this is what I was talking about. Now, before I get to the end here of what I was going to say, I do want to address the question that I said I would address, right, which is the Juniper thing. So where does this leave Juniper? I've talked a lot about Aruba. Well, obviously, right, we've completed our acquisition, and if you've been paying attention to the news at all and keeping up with this, it's a very exciting time. In fact, we just spent a lot of time talking to the D&H folks about what it all means. We've been talking with our distributors, right, because they're again our first line of support. So we've been trying to talk to them as much as we can. But obviously, as our partners, and you guys in particular, being in this program, right, it's important that you guys are some of the best partners that D&H has. So it's important that you understand as well where we're headed with these things. Juniper, what they bring to the table from a campus perspective, right? Obviously, there's a lot in service provider, there's a lot in firewalling, and certainly that is on the horizon, and that's coming, and I don't want to minimize that. But for our conversation today, really what we're talking about is Mist, right? We're talking about Juniper Mist, managing, different APs, and what is that going to look like going forward? Well, here's the answer. For as long as possible, we're going to support both platforms, right? We're going to be able to say, yeah, if somebody's happy with Mist, keep them on Mist, right? We're going to play nicely with each other, right? Where that translates to dollars on the back end. I know a lot of the folks on the call are sales oriented or sales leadership. So just so you understand, that means we are sharing a big pool. Just to be frank, the field teams, right? They're not going to be competing with each other because everybody's getting paid for everything, right? It's you guys are getting paid for it. We're getting paid for it. Nobody's stepping on each other's toes. It's not co-channel interference, to make a relevant analogy, right? We're actually going to be helping each other meet our quotas and meet the expectations. From an actual platform perspective, again, both are going to be around. Mist will be around. Central will be around. We put a lot of eggs into the brand new Central bucket. If you guys have been paying attention at all, the last 2 years have been heavily focused on us migrating from what we would call traditional Central to Central Next Gen or New Central. And it's so much more robust and capable and AI driven, very similar to Mist, that we don't want to just abandon that, right? And we certainly don't want to abandon the people that have found out that, hey, Mist knew what they were talking about when they were talking about self-driving AI. So certainly you'll see that stick around. You'll see a lot of sharing It's already starting to happen. If you guys have any customers who have Marvis, right, who've bought Marvis, what you'll notice is that the update that's getting ready to come out for Marvis looks a lot like the Aruba Central AI Copilot that we've got, right? So you're already starting to see a lot of the sharing happening on the back end. It really is happening. And in fact, there'll be announcements made probably within the next month or two that really gets into the weeds about what that's going to look like. But a lot of sharing between platforms. Obviously, I've spent this time today talking about the Wi-Fi 7 APs because I want to show you, and Mist knows this, right? Juniper knows this. We put a lot of stock in our hardware, right? We put a lot in these things that are not, again, just part of the standard or just bump it all off to Aruba Central to handle. We try and handle a lot of the stuff on the AP itself. So what does that mean going forward? Well, Mist is a very lightweight OS that runs on those things, right? And if you look at the Mist APs, they certainly have virtual BLE and certain things enabled. But again, they haven't worried so much about some of the things that we've worried about. They've put a lot more into making sure that their AI is self-driving, right? And so what I think you'll see going forward is, yeah, Aruba kind of has the reins, and we've had the reins for a long time on what the Wi-Fi hardware looks like. But we're going to support both customers. But I think in the future, what you're going to see is, yeah, Aruba's hardware, smarts and their muscle on that is going to stick around because why not, right? We've already established ourselves as power players in that way. And then of course what you're going to see on Central, right? Let's say that you're coming from Mist to Central, you're going to see a lot more of that self-driving in Central. AI's been there, but man, Mist really knew how to make it so that it's doing a lot of the stuff for you, right? I'm getting ready to give a talk to some other conference way on the other side of the country where I'm talking about how self-driving kind of sells, right? That's what Mist has built their platform on. So you're going to see a lot more talk about self-driving networks, both from Juniper Mist and from Aruba Central, and you'll see it a lot in these Wi-Fi 7 APs. So I'm telling you, with no reservations, you're not going to lose anything by investing heavily into the Wi-Fi 7 standard on Aruba, or by choosing Juniper Mist or Aruba Central as your management platform. I hope that was the best corporate answer, non-answer that I could give, but you'll see more, and you'll have a lot more visibility in the coming month or two. But okay, that's all I've got, and I think we're going to talk about promotions.
Well, thank you, Brennan and Paul. That was very inspiring, and I actually learned a lot. So thank you. So in this part of the slide, we talk about the promotions that we have for our Epic partners. This highlights our growth, achievement, and net new partner programs. Both of these programs run from October 1 through November 30th of this year. And these programs are designed to reward growth and encourage new partners to engage with HPE networking solutions. So the first one, growth achievement. So it is the top 15 partners by revenue with at least 10% year-over-year growth. And then the second one is net new partner promotion. Again, that's the top 15 net new partners. And net new partners are described as haven't purchased networking product within the last 12 months. And both of these winners will receive a $300 D&H account credit. And one caveat, you have to be a D&H Epic partner to be included in the promotion. And our last page, our final call to action. So in summary, we want to unlock the power of HPE networking with Wi-Fi 7 and bring your wireless infrastructure to the next level. This enjoys ultra fast speeds, reliable connectivity, advanced security, smart location tracking, and sustainable performance with a comprehensive portfolio to access points tailored to fit every environment, from offices to industrial sites. Here at D&H, we want to maximize your growth. So if you're not a partner with our Epic Partner Plan, we encourage you to join as this unlocks exclusive incentives, technical resources, and sales enablement tools. So take advantage of our current promotions to accelerate your revenue and market leadership. We're here to give you support, expert support. Our team is ready to help you design, deploy, and optimize next generation wireless solutions. Whether you need technical guidance, marketing assets, or a custom demo, we're here to support you. Take the next step. You can register now or view our HPE mini site for program details and resources. Or you can always contact me, Danielle Williams, your Epic program manager, and that is dwilliams@dnh.com for personalized partnership opportunities. Thank you. And I don't see we have any questions. We will open the floor if you have anything at the moment. No, come on, there's got to be one question for Aruba Networking, our channel systems engineer for Brennan.
I'll do one little bonus piece of information, okay? In light of not having a question. One thing that I always fail to mention is that if you've designed networks for 5 gigahertz, you're pretty well set for the 6 gigahertz band, right? That's the question that comes up a lot. Kind of one of those low-level questions, but it's very important, right? Is, okay, if I've designed my floor plans for 5 gigahertz, am I good to go for the 6 gigahertz band? And the answer is almost all the time, yes. Right now, there might be an occasion where, yeah, we might need to get a little more dense, or maybe we're moving from high density to very high density. And again, I'm going to point you to Paul and team to rely on them to be able to answer those questions. However, don't fret, right? If you've designed for 5 gigahertz networks, you should be good to go. If you're on 2.4 gigahertz, right? This is the time, man. Like, I don't know another way to say it. You're not going to get the benefits of 6 gigahertz that much because you have all the spectrum to use. But if there's no density, it doesn't matter too much, right? So this is the time to push people towards designing around 5 and 6 gigahertz band. And again, that's luckily something that these guys can help you with, and certainly we're happy to help with. But that was my last little bit of info. I was like, oh, shoot, I wanted to mention that. I forgot it, but appreciate it, Danielle. Sorry.
You got it. You got it. And with that, we'll give you 8 minutes back. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great one, everyone.